Today I will show you how I drew this picture of my dog using colored pencil. The materials I used was the Strathmore Bristol Smooth paper 300 series, which is a 100-pound paper, and Prismacolor Premier Colored pencils, and a few Faber-Castell Polychromos colored pencils as well. I input the full list of materials that I used in the description box below for your reference. So I started with the dog's eye, and I used an indigo blue and a dark brown, so just basically a dark blue and dark brown to create my own black. And this is just mixing the two colors on top of each other, layering in until you achieve the shade that you want. And this way, if you're using a straight black, you're going to have a very flat image because you won't be able to get much different shades going on, and it'll just be very dark. So I do eventually use some straight black in there to the parts that I really want darkened, but at least to start off that way, you know, it's easier to start off lighter than you want rather than darker. It's hard to take away the darkness. I'm not going to go into too much detail on how I did the eye because I did do a video that I dedicated to how I drew his eye, and it's at a little bit slower speed so you can see a little bit better my pencil strokes and how I went about making the details and whatnot. So I'm going to link that video below. And so you'll also notice that there's grid marks all over my drawing, and that's how I sketched out. That's what I used to sketch out my drawing. I use the grid method. If you're not familiar with the grid method, it's basically drawing a grid onto your reference photo and then drawing a grid onto your paper that you're going to draw with. And it's just making sure, you know, you have the same amount of lines and squares and stuff, and just copying whatever you see in each square, you're going to copy it into the squares that you drew out. You might be able to see like the numbers on the side, so I put letters on the top in each box and then numbers on the side, and that's just reference points. So like A3, you know, I can make sure I'm drawing the right shapes in the right boxes. And the grid method just really helps me a lot achieve the right proportions and keep all my drawing pretty accurate to the reference photo, and it's improved my drawings a lot in comparison to when I'm just using freehand. So with the fur, it was a little bit challenging for me because I don't have a lot of experience with colored pencils, so it's a lot of experimentation with blending and the textures. So just using a base color first, whatever base color you have in your picture, that's a lighter color, and then I colored my whole section with that, and then gone over it with other colors, blending it out with odorless paint thinner. I use Mona Lisa odorless paint thinner to really burnish the colors into the tooth of the paper, into the grooves, and then going over with different colors, adding more darker colors to add more depth of the fur, and then pulling highlights with either a white pencil or even with the electric pencil eraser to pull out highlighted sections of the fur, and then coloring over those to make it a little bit darker so it's not so white. And then I actually had to switch color pencils and use the the Polychromos pencils, because they're a lot harder pencils and you get finer details on there because it's an oil-based pencil. And once you get too much wax buildup with the Prismacolors, it's hard to get more details. I did the nose using the indigo blue and brown, dark brown, to get the black, and using a lot of tiny circular motions to get the details of the nose, because there's a lot of circular patterns on the nose. And then I did use dark black towards the end to get the little details, like the darker areas of the nose, like the nostrils. I kind of did that more towards the end too, once I saw the overall picture and got to see what needed to be darkened up a bit more. Oh, and I also used white to burnish into the nose as well, and to create the highlights as well. So also, when I burnish with the odorless paint thinner, I'm just using a small amount of paint thinner on a brush and just brushing through the colored pencils. If you use too much, it's going to pull off too much colors. That paint thinner is going to help a lot with the wax buildup as well, so you can add more layers. With the Prismacolors, it does get really waxy, so it's hard to build up layers, which is why I had to switch to the Polychromos pencils to add the details on there. So drawing the collar of the dog, I used different shades of red and blues that whatever matched the reference photo. So I kind of drew out the blue paw print pattern out first, and then I colored in the collar with the base color red, and then I went about with like the darker reds to add the details, and of course darker red for the collar part that's underneath the front part, and then the dark part of the colors I used to make the grooves in the fabric and the little details, and so using a sharp pencil for that, and then of course using a darker blue to make the imprints in the fabric as well, or the material, and then I used black for the latch, and then use white to highlight, and I also use my electric pencil eraser to pull out more highlights because I darkened it too much. That helped a lot, and then blending it out with white to make a nice smooth looking plastic piece there. And then continuing on with the fur again. I'll also forgot to mention the edge where the orange or orangey tan fur meets the white fur. I added a color to kind of blend it into the white fur. It's like a gray brown color, like a light gray brown color, so kind of indicate that it's turning into white, because it doesn't go straight, orange and then white. It kind of sort of looks like there's blending there. There's a little bit more shadow on the edge for the white fur where it's meeting the dark edge. Just working continuously on the fur, trying to get it how I want it. I'm using a lot of white pencil to blend it out a little bit more, and then adding lots of different colors in there, and then I'm adding a lot of different grays and like grayish blues in the white parts of the fur to just show like the different textures. And then here I'm working on the tag for the dog, so I had to kind of redraw it with my pencil at first because it didn't look quite right. So just always try to make sure your pencil sketch is pretty accurate before you start drawing, because when drawing with a colored pencil, because once you start it's kind of hard to fix. And even after I started, I did kind of mess up on the star tag, and I did have to kind of like adjust it a bit. So just using different colors that you see. And then with the bell, it was a little bit more challenging because it's trying to look metallic, so I had to pull out a lot more shine and highlights using the electric eraser, because I had darkened it too much. It didn't look quite right, so I had to pull out more highlights that way. And yeah, you're just going to use a lot of different colors to achieve the different tones, and all it is just looking at your reference photo and making sure you're pulling in different colors in different parts, and just don't look so much as I gotta make it look like a bell, just look at it as shapes, or like different shapes. Like, okay, there's kind of like this wiggly line right here, that's the part that's indicating a shadow or a reflection or whatnot. Just look at the shape of it, don't try to look at the overall image. As the more you go through your drawing too, you're gonna see, okay, I need to darken this up more because this part of the drawing is a lot lighter, or maybe a lot darker. So it's always just constantly adjusting, looking at your drawing and adjusting. And especially when you pull the background in, the background's gonna change your image a lot too. Like in this drawing too, after I added the background, I kind of made the background too dark, so then I had to darken up my picture a little bit more. The background, it's really challenging because I picked a challenging background, and I decided to, instead of just making some plain boring black background, which just straight, one color in the background, I wanted to do it like how the picture was, where it was grass. And it wasn't just grass, it's the grass that was dying in our yard, so it had a lot of like the roots of the grass dried out. So it kind of looked like twigs almost, and then tiny bits of grass as well as some dead pieces of grass. So I don't know why I decided to draw it that exact way that I had seen, so I went ahead and I did that. the mistake I may have done was I just erased the whole grid and then just started drawing it freehand, and instead of kind of drawing out with the grid what different lines and things I drew, I see, but it still came out okay. I think so. It worked out just fine. It was really challenging to try to just achieve the look of all the twigs and whatnot, and the roots of the grass that were showing through. So I was just layering a lot of different colors, and then I'm just experimenting, and what I found was if I lay down a thick coat, if I just pressed really hard with my colored pencil and just got a thick color down with all the different colors I was mixing, just picking all of them up together, I could burnish them with the paint thinner, and then also use my pencil eraser to erase all like the different lines for the roots and whatnot, and then burnish it, and then it would kind of just blur it out a little bit, so it would look pretty decent. It came out pretty decent that way using that method, and then just using like a darker pencil to kind of draw in the details of the shadows around the edges of each root and whatnot. So here I was just doing a lot of different colors blending in, and then the mistake I made here too is I was working in different sections. So I did the part underneath him first, and then I did like a little section on the side, and then I did a little section on the top, and then I realized I need to just do the whole background all at once so that I don't have like different parts looking so different, because I'm changing up, you know, I don't remember the exact steps that I did. So I just went through the whole thing, and just eventually I figured it out that way, and I just went through the whole drawing. I laid down one color all throughout the whole picture, and then added another color throughout the whole picture, and then burnished that color. And then I think before I did that, I used like a white pencil to like draw all these marks for where the roots and twigs and whatnot was going to be, and then I burnished it, and then I kind of maintained the lines there. And then I went on top, and then in some parts that I didn't do that, I went on top with the white and then added it after I put down the color. That worked too. Either way, it was working. It was just a complete experimentation, and I always feel like I can always fix things if I just work on it. So even if it didn't work out, I can still keep working on it and fix it. Then adding more colors in between, adding more shadows under the dog, adding the grass, the different shades of green for the different colors that come out through the grass, including some yellows. And then I use my pencil eraser a lot to try to achieve like little bits and pieces of rock and stone in there too. And then all the highlighted parts that I made sure to put shadows under all of them so it appears three-dimensional, and then burnishing them too so it has a little more of a blurred effect because it is in the background. And then as I went through the background, I decided I kind of wanted to make like a vignette looking image where the corners and the edges of the paper were darkened, so it really highlights the focal image a lot more. So I ended up going through and like coloring with a really dark brown on the edges. And then here you can see, wow, the dog looks like he's glowing because the background's so dark. So I went back and I added more shading and whatnot through the color, through the white parts especially, and then the edges of the brown I darkened up a little so it wouldn't look like he was glowing. The edges of the fur I darkened up a bit. So it was getting really, really waxy too, so when I was making the edges brown, it was just clumping up, but it's okay because I knew I was going to burnish it with the Mona Lisa paint thinner. And I made the mistake of putting on too much paint thinner at first, so I just kind of was like peeling off the color. But once it was kind of dried out, and then I was just kind of rubbing in with the brush, it really blended it out really nice on the edges. I also used my pencil eraser to pull out some grass and stuff because I didn't have the grass there before, so I had to add more in because I was like, hey, it's looking a little bald with the missing grass, so I had to pull out pieces like that. And don't forget to clean your pencil eraser, because I noticed too when I was trying to erase some highlights that I was missing that it wasn't working as good, and then I realized I just need to clean my eraser, and then it pulled out a lot of color after that, so that worked out really nice. And finally I added some whiskers using the acrylic paint and a fine paintbrush. So this is the final piece again. Thank you so much for watching. You have a great day.